Hello, Canada and soccer fans from coast to coast to coast. Welcome back to the Hangout, joined by Kurt Larson and Oliver Platt. My name is Adam Jenkins. Great to see you all again. Hope everyone had a fantastic Father's Day yesterday. Kurt, your first Father's Day, how was that for you?
Yeah, I was wondering what you were going at there because as far as I know, both you guys aren't fathers, so well, you're celebrating your fathers, obviously. But yeah, it was good. I've said this repeatedly on shows that there's one good thing that's come of us being at home for what now 3 months. It's that my son likes me more now. My 10-month-old, 11-month-old son likes me more now. So that's the one good thing for me.
I mean, we don't have sons or daughters yet, but Ollie had a special day yesterday too. Happy belated birthday, Oliver Platt. What was your big? I'm sorry, stage two wasn't quite there yet for Torontonians, but what'd you get up to yesterday?
Not a whole lot to be honest. I'm getting to the age now where I prefer to pretend that my birthdays don't really happen. I was quite happy at 26, 27, and now I'm heading towards 30. So I just let them kind of go by, and
You're not 30 yet? I thought you were 30.
I'm 28. But
Oh,
thanks.
Okay. You act older. You're wise. You're wise beyond your years, Oliver Platt.
To be fair, like Kurt didn't. I don't know that Kurt still knows how old I am. He's asked me like 4 times since I started this network, and each time it's a different number. So
Well, I can't believe it though. You're so young and professional and clean cut. Is again, we've made some good hires at OneSoccer.
fishing for the compliment, success. All
Going
right,
back
guys,
to
let's get.
going back to one second. Going back to birthdays not mattering. This is a sore spot with me because my son was born 3 days before my birthday. So now I officially will never have a birthday again. It's going to be Killian Larson featuring Kurt.
Well, if you're in Ollie's boat, then you wouldn't mind that because then all the attention would be someone else. Ollie, by the way, you don't look a day over 26, bud. You look great.
Thank
Let's
you.
get into the show, shall we? Kurt,
Yeah,
it's time for
please.
our favorite CPL drinking game. What's the latest on the return to play tournament with the CPL?
Well, I'm reading what everybody else is reading, or at least trying to find the information in the news. And Oliver Platt pointed one out a week ago and sent it to me. There's actually a print exclusive. I don't believe it ran anywhere online in the Maritimes. I think the Guardian and PEI wrote it. It was published also in Halifax in the Chronicle Herald. But there's an interview with the commissioner specifically talking about Charlottetown as a possible preferred site for the CPL, and I just thought it was interesting in terms of tipping the scales and maybe showing their hand a little bit, where they might be most interested in going. Now, everything we're hearing is of course Vancouver Island is still there, and it's 50-50 right now in terms of where this league's going to go. But in that piece, the commissioners talking about, he can't say enough good things about Charlottetown and really talking it up as a host city. So I thought that was pretty interesting to have a story pop up in the city of where the CPL is looking to go.
Ollie, anything to add there? You're going to outscoop the one
No.
expert?
No, not really. It does seem as if, and again, I don't know a lot more than everyone else does, but it does seem as if the provincial government in PEI is very enthusiastic about the idea, and we've discussed why. It's an attractive thing for an economy that's losing a lot of tourism this summer, and so you would think that would be something that could potentially be a crucial and decisive factor, is the enthusiasm of the provincial government. So we'll see, but yeah, I don't know much more than most people, I don't think.
Yeah, I think wherever the league decides to go, you just got to think about the massive injection of capital and cash into the hotels and the food service business and facilities, and then also hiring people locally to help work on the project. So it's a big win for whichever province lands the league for whatever it is, 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah. Well, with nothing concrete further than that to report, we're going to talk a little hypothetical CPL news to tide you over until we get some more details. We're going to start with the best roster of Canadian players. So I'm going to ask you two gentlemen, if the CPL were to start tomorrow, whether it was in Charlottetown, Iqaluit, Yellowknife, Dawson, Yukon, who knows, wherever it goes, we were going to start tomorrow, which team would win if they could only field their Canadian players? I'll let you go first.
Okay, well, I'm going to rule out 3 straight off the bat here, and I'll see if Kurt has any has any disputes. So Valor have no real defenders who are Canadian, you know, a couple of young guys in Garcia and Labori, but no one else. Ottawa's can't field a field Canadians right now, so they're gone. And Halifax, I think, have a lot of kind of young and unproven guys, a few youth sports players, so I've ruled them out as well. So I'm going from the other 5. And for me, I think it's York 9. I've been a little more skeptical than most, I think, about, you know, putting York 9 at the front of the pack when it comes to the overall roster, because I do believe that the continuity that Forge and Cavalry have is going to be very important. But you look at some of the players that those two teams would lose in this all-Canadian scenario. You know, Cavalry aren't left with a lot up front. You'd have Arab and Pepper or Jose Hernandez leading the line, 2 young guys. Forge, you obviously have lost Borges. You lose Kreutzer and Ashinioti Jonsson as well, 2 crucial players for them. York 9, on the other hand, is basically the same team as they had last year, except that you add Chris Manella and you add Michael Petrasso. So for me, I think in an all-Canadian league, I would have to pick York 9.
Kurt Larson.
Yeah, so I had York 9 as an interesting pick until I realized that I could no longer have Ryan Telfer on my list of Canadian players, unfortunately, as he decided to switch allegiances. I guess, you know, the men's national team here in Canada didn't show allegiance to him. So he switched and went to Trinidad and Tobago. So,
well, hang on. He's born in Canada.
No, this is so Oliver, you know that in soccer, you always, you know, go by where they play internationally. Is that not true?
I think you can still call him a Canadian, even though he doesn't.
Okay.
Play
Well,
we're not talking domestic versus international. We're talking Canadian footballers.
Well, he is Canadian.
He is Canadian, but in terms of the league's front office, as far as I know, he is not considered a Canadian.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so now I've changed Oliver's mind.
Someone in the live chat's already on this. We're going to talk about.
Probably should have figured this out before.
Yeah, I'm gonna rule on Kurt's side here.
Wait, so here we go. So here we go once again. Oliver saying I've changed the rules mid game. It's just that's his go-to line for when I actually get one up on him. But unlike starting at the bottom, like Oliver Platt did for absolutely no reason, I'm going to start at the top because there's really no contest here. Forge FC, if you recall, started 9 Canadians in the return leg of the CPL finals. Yes, they have lost Tristan Borges, but if we're just going on, you know, overall roster and depth, Forge played 11 of the 14 players Forge played in the finals, and leg 2 of the finals were Canadian. So I'm going with Forge. You have to go with Forge.
Okay, if Telfer's out, then I probably would go with Forge, but you know, Aparicio, Manella, and Di Chiara versus a midfield of Becker, Frano, and Chouanier, that's close. Like the Borges and Ashinioti Jonsson losses, I think, do hurt Forge in particular in this hypothetical.
What about a dark horse team? Just one.
Dark horse. Well, I had Y9 third. I didn't actually go beyond my top 4 because I thought after you get past the 4, all things are equal. I think I agree with Oliver that you have to put Ottawa 8th right now. But I put Pacific, and not necessarily because I like, you know, a lot of their young players. I think Oliver has a little bit more affection for those guys than I do, but because of the Canadians they've added and the experience they've added in Jamar Dixon and Mayor Jaguar. I think you have Bustos. Yeah, sorry, Bustos. So you have to go with Pacific, right?
Yeah, Pacific only have one international right now, so you can essentially put a full strength team out there.
Okay, game number 2, and we'll make sure that you guys can raise any red flags about rules and semantics before we get going. But game number 2, who would have the best center back pairing should the tournament start tomorrow? Kurt?
Well, you can look at this one a few different ways, and I'm still going to go with Cavalry, regardless of there being a legitimate argument as to are they better in a back 2 or a back 4 or a back 3. But I do think that even if you play Zator on the right side and your 2, say, central players are Jay Wheeldon and Trafford, I think they showed throughout last year that what they might lack in pace, they more than make up for in just their game intelligence, game management. And it's the reason why they were one of the best back lines in the league. But the reason why I like this question a lot is because I do think that the center back position is probably one of the strongest things about this league. You look across it, Edmonton with Didic and Tim Guia are formidable. You have to look at Forge with David Edgar back there. And Crutzen was fantastic last year. So I think it's a strength of the league is the center backs.
Well, I think you just mentioned Crutzen. I don't think we know where Ollie's going here, but
well, there's only one answer to this. It's Edgar and Crutzen. I've just for you guys, I pulled the stats up here to make my case. They played 10 games together second half of last season after David Edgar signs. 9 wins and 3 goals against, including the 2 games in the finals, which were obviously both clean sheets against Cavalry. So how can you look past those guys right now? They were absolutely formidable together. They're a perfect complement of, Edgar's experience and physicality with Crutzen's ability on the ball. I do not see Zator is a fantastic young player. Trafford is a great veteran, but I just think those two are so complete when you put them together.
Love David Edgar. He's with Wheeler on Inside the Game tomorrow, which should be a fascinating conversation, just given his experience in England and now coming back here. But at a certain point, you do reach an age where maybe you start to slow down. I agree with Oliver Platt that they were fantastic last year, particularly in the finals, where really we should have given out 2 MVPs, one to Edgar and one to Crutzen for the way they stood up in Calgary in the second leg. Do want to take the opportunity to give a shout out to Valor. I think they could be interesting at the back if Andrew Jean-Baptiste comes good. I'm interested to see what kind of form he's in. And the Panamanian guy Soto, if he can get into the country. I don't believe he's in Canada yet. If he can get into the country, that could be an interesting pairing.
Yeah. Well, final stop on the OneSoccer hype train. Who is the leading candidate, the front runner, if you will, to replace Tristan Borges this season? We spoke to him last week on the Hangouts after airing from Stone and our conversation with the director Adrian Asufi. But Tristan Borges joined Asa Rahman to discuss last year where he's at right now in Belgium. The guy won 3 of the 5 major awards at the CPL Awards. So if we had to pick a front runner to be this year's Tristan Borges, who would it be? Ollie, you can go first this time.
Well, let me clarify this before Ollie gets into, so he can't say I'm changing the rules. Like, I think we're not saying who's going to, win the Golden Boot, win MVP. We're not looking for a repeat of that. The way I went about this was, who's going to be the next young Canadian to make a name, in the sport and potentially, grab headlines and maybe even move on. That's where I'm coming from. Is that where you're coming from, Oliver?
Well, we've moved the goalpost slightly there, but I think my answer still works. He's maybe not as young as Borges and some of the other players in the league, so whether he goes on to Europe, I could see him going to MLS, but Europe we'd have to wait and see. But the one guy who I thought was, for a significant stretch of the season, actually better than Tristan Borges, the only player in the league I thought was better than Tristan Borges for at least a chunk of the year last year, was Sergio Camargo. And I think if he can stay fully fit, he has all the quality to be the best player in the CPL.
Kurt Larson, your rebuttal.
Well, I know Tommy Wilden certainly agrees with Oliver Platt. And before last season, he told me that he thought Sergio Camargo was going to be the breakout player in the league and was the most dynamic, best player in the league. And I think at times he showed that he was that. And, even when they went to Saputo Stadium in the Canadian Championship and ended up losing to the Montreal Impact, Sergio Camargo was one of the few players on Calvary that stood out as being able to compete at that level in a good way. But I went with somebody who's capable of maybe grabbing a little bit more attention, doing the things that make highlight tapes. We saw him make one of the best highlights of last year. And he's been mentioned to me as somebody who could break out. I think it's somewhat of a long shot, but somebody who still has the tools to do it, and that's Cadell Thomas of Forge. I also think you have to pick somebody on a team that's probably going to compete for a championship and steal the headlines. So I went with Cadell Thomas, who unfortunately was sidelined for a significant portion of the end of last season after that horrific head-to-head collision.
Yeah, he's got a lot of ability. I question the consistency with him. I think he's got more spectacular moments than he has game in, game out impact, but he's certainly got talent.
Yeah, but I see. I mean, how much did that have to do with there being kind of a lack of consistency in what Smirniotis did with his lineups up front, right? I mean, we talked about last season how we thought that he had 5 or 6 players at his disposal, and they could basically rotate through every position up front, and it actually, I thought, kind of stymied a few guys from getting a run of games, right?
They could. I think there were guys who won their spot. Borges is the obvious one. Novak, Nanko, they were good enough to stick in the team when it mattered. But yeah, I take your point. And I think Chouanier is another one who you could argue in that way as well.
Most of the speculation behind and get to a little bit of news. Starting with last night, everyone's favorite CPL coach on Twitter, Jeff Paulus, tweeted, "Saw a poll earlier asking about keeping the 5-sub rule post-COVID. I am personally in favor of this, especially for a league like ours with so many young Canadians who need to play. Limit teams to 3 sub periods during run of play and another at halftime to limit the effect on flow. Do we agree with Jeff Paulus? Should the 5-sub rule stick around for the return to play tournament in the foreseeable future?" Ollie?
I'm going to disagree with Jeff on this one. I just don't think it's necessary. Like, I get it why we're doing it right now. Teams are playing a lot of games, just constant midweek games. You have to kind of protect the players, and we've already seen a lot of injuries. I don't know that teams were really given enough time to get ready for this restart around the world, and that's been a bit of a problem. But in the longer run, when we're back to some form of normality, I think this is just something that's going to favor. I'm looking at it more globally than CPL here, but it's going to favor the big teams. They're going to collect more players. They're going to accumulate bigger squads. They're going to have the money to do that, and you just hand them more of an advantage, right, by allowing them to use more of those players. Add to the fact that it's just another thing on top of VAR that slows the game down and breaks things up. And I'd have to be against this one.
I wouldn't be so much against it for that reason, Ollie. I don't think it's going to slow the game down much, just given the way they can implement it, right, in a maximum amount of breaks in the second half.
Yeah, you still got more players coming off though, and they take their time, and I think it still does that.
Hey, every player deserves a clap around the stadium before they come off,
especially an empty one. Yeah.
To be fair, Paulus did say in his tweet that he would limit it to 3 subs within the game, but you could have an extra 2 if you use them at halftime, for example.
Ollie, didn't you ever
pull your devil's advocate?
Ollie, didn't you ever pull your socks down, take the shin guards off, do a little clap with the shin guards together to the fans, or did you never play in front of anybody?
I don't know if I ever played in front of a big enough crowd to justify that.
I also disagree with Jeff, and not because I think it'll make the game any worse, but I think you should believe in your young players enough to play them from the start. I don't think you should need extra substitutes in order to throw on Prince Amanda for the last 10 minutes of the game and see what he can do in a situation that really, according to the game state, might not even be realistic, right? It might not even be a situation that's good for development. So I think you should have trust in your players, and if you want to play the young guys, then play them. Don't need a 4th or 5th substitute late in the game to throw them on.
All right, move on from there to Atletico Ottawa. And on Thursday, their coach Mista had an interview, his first full English interview. So shout out to the coach for working on his English. I know that's going to help us out a lot at OneSoccer. But he was quoted in an interview with Northern Tribune and John Jacques saying, "We continue to watch players to incorporate them into our team. I think in the next few weeks, we were thinking to introduce everyone. I can say that this is practically very close, maybe to sign 3 or 4 players, Canadians too." Ollie, what do you think about the potential of Atletico Ottawa adding Canadian players, and who might they be?
I don't know who they are.
There's a lot of Canadians. There's a lot of Canadian players.
If there was one that I would like to see in the CPL, I'm going to wave this flag again as I have done a few times during this quarantine. Mo Babuli. Get him in the league. Come on, the guy was such a fun player to watch. He was almost like a guy who hadn't really been raised in a kind of professional environment. He had that kind of street aspect to his game. I don't know where he is or what's happened to him. I think he had a couple of tryouts at the two other Ontario clubs that didn't work out. And it's all gone quiet again. So I'm going to try and get this going. Get Mo Babuli in the CPL.
Starting a hashtag.
Yeah.
T-shirts too.
Babuli for
CPL. Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a realistic name to throw out there. I'm not sure what's going on with Simeon Jackson, if he's re-upped with anybody in England, but there was talks of him being a free agent, leaving Stevenage, and he's had a bit of a goal drought over the last 2 or 3 years, I believe. So maybe he's an option to come back now, just towards the end of his career. Marcus Haber came to mind. I don't know if he's decided to retire. I haven't seen an announcement from him. I know there were some issues at Pacific and the original contract he signed, and then how that was going to work and severing ties. I was disappointed in him last season, and not sure if eventually he got benched, and obviously Terran Campbell comes along and takes his place. So I would like to see him get another shot if he wants it. And then there's the guy that I would love nothing more than to see back in Canada for one final go.
You're going to go Ian Hume?
Not Ian Hume. Ian Hume.
Okay.
We got to see him. We could see him on OneSoccer, though. So maybe we'll sign him to come and do some stuff for us. But I think Atiba Hutchinson deserves, a Canadian tour, a Canadian-wide tour, so people can really see and appreciate him. Because unfortunately, although the level in Turkey is very good, and Besiktas competes, in the Champions League, I still don't think enough Canadians understand what he's done. Everybody's following Alphonso Davies right now. But Atiba, guys like Atiba and Julian de Guzman, they went over and did it before people were paying attention. So I would love to see Atiba Hutchinson come back. I also heard his name thrown around as a potential owner one day in CPL, so that's kind of interesting too.
Did you see that tweet about Atiba? I have no idea if it was like true or legitimate or not, but it said that he had recently done some like fitness tests, I guess, with Besiktas, and he tested at the age of like a 21-year-old or something.
I did see that, and it terrifies me that those tests exist, because I would definitely test older than I am. Much like you, Oliver.
He's playing Champions League for another 10 years, into his 40s.
CONCACAF Champions League, maybe. All right, speaking of Atletico Ottawa, see, that's a good segue there. Speaking of Atletico Ottawa, it was also recently announced that they will be in the Canadian Championship, whatever that looks like, whenever it takes place. Toronto Masters, FA, and AS Blainville, who qualified through the PLSQ, and League One Ontario will keep their spots for 2021. Kurt, I will ask you this. What should the format of this 2020 Voyageurs Cup look like?
Well, the format should be what they originally wanted it to be. And there were a ton of great matchups in the Canadian Championship, with York 9 potentially matching up with TFC if they get past the first round. And I believe out west there was a potential Pacific Whitecaps matchup. I think Halifax might have been paired with Montreal as well. I haven't looked back at the original bracket, but that would have been great. And I was really happy to see Canada Soccer come out with that bracket and really do what they're doing in the United States now in the U.S. Open Cup, which is just really regionalize the first round, allow fans to easily travel between markets, and then see where it goes from there. Unfortunately, we don't really know where we stand with that. And if we just speak logically, how difficult would it be for every province, every jurisdiction to, first of all, agree to allow games to be hosted in their respective cities? So that's a first major hurdle, and no idea if that's going to happen. So logically, maybe something that would make sense was doing some kind of single site. I'm not sure how you would do that. Do you just do one-off games? Probably, but I think when we're seeing the CPL come to terms with its single site event, and maybe the Canadian Championship needs to go in that direction as well.
Yeah.
Ollie, what do you think?
Bring on more World Cups. It's the year of the World Cup style tournament. Yeah, that would be interesting. With the number of teams you've got now, it would seem to lend itself to, having a 6-team first rounds. The MLS clubs get a bye. The two CPL teams get a bye. I guess you would give that to Cavalry, and then maybe Forge as the champions. And then, you take 3 out of the first round, add it to the 5, and you have a quarterfinal, right? So that could be a way to play in, a fairly limited period of time, especially if you went to single elimination, which I would like to see in the Canadian Championship anyway, because I think it would add another layer of excitement. So something like that I could see, and it would be great to be able to get the tournament in some format this year.
Very good. Okay, we only got about 5 minutes left, so we were going to talk about World Cup qualifying, but I know, Ollie, you're still trying to wrap your head around whatever the heck the latest reports out of Panama are. So we're going to stay that for today and come back to it when we understand a little
Save
bit
it
better.
for Wednesday. Excellent.
Save it for Wednesday.
This keeps getting kicked down the road. How does this happen?
Because they keep changing it every day. We don't have enough
Complicated.
time to understand what exactly is going on. Speaking of complicated, the situation in Vancouver right now with the Whitecaps is a little bit testy between ownership and the fans after Mark Panis, the CEO, was let go after only, I believe, 6 months on the job. And he was one of the few executives that seemed to win the hearts of the fan base very, very quickly. We saw sell the Whitecaps or sell the Caps trending on Twitter. Not a good look. Kurt, is this, though, an opportunity for Pacific FC to say, hey, we're a pro sports team and we're a pro soccer team in British Columbia. Come vote for us or come support us. And what would your pitch to those Whitecaps fans be if you were PFC?
Oh, boy. First of all, there are a ton of instances of selling teams not actually ending up going well and being in a better situation. So I'm not really sure why that would have been the solution. I don't know. There was some talk of, should Pacific get after the Whitecaps a little bit on social media, maybe, poke the bear a little bit. But that could be a bad idea because, I think Pacific wants to have a good relationship with the Whitecaps, maybe loan some players back and forth. I think they have a good relationship given who's in their front office now with Pa Moduka. So I can't see that happening. But just going back to the fan base in general, I think Oliver's probably knows a little bit more about the MLS side of things right now than me. And I think he's done, a little bit more reading on the Whitecap situation. But, Oliver, what actually cured the situation at TFC? All the turmoil for 5, 6, 7 years. What actually cured that?
Well, start of Tim Wiki, I guess.
Hope, winning, trophies.
Oh, okay. I didn't know we were talking about kind of concepts rather than actual.
Fewer losses. No, what I'm saying is that ultimately the reason there's so much discontent, and I'm not minimizing the things that have happened off the field, very serious allegations, but adding to it is that on the field, this team has not been a success. They've actually been extremely poor at times.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but it's kind of getting to the point with the Whitecaps where I even question whether winning would be enough. I think the team they've got now, they've brought in Cavallini and some decent players, and I think there is kind of a little bit of a sense of hope and excitement about the roster they've got now, but the club has just, disillusioned the fan base to such an extent through all the scandals that we've seen over the past couple of years, but also with just the general kind of lack of communication, I think, which was something that ironically Mark Panis seemed to be very good at and was addressing. I don't know. I obviously success would help, but I don't know if it would cure the whole thing here.
They've had a dozen losses in all but one season. They've won one Canadian championship. They've won only one playoff series. Coming off of the second worst season all time in MLS for them. I think it all adds up.
Yeah, it does. What they do have, I think, is a good coach and a coach that people like. And so he is the guy that I think could maybe, even if the organization remains, a little short of what's desired in terms of how it treats its fan base, I think he's the guy who could maybe unite people around him.
Not to mention, the DP signings have just been horrendous throughout the years over there. It hasn't gone well.
All right, finally today, one more note, and staying with Major League Soccer, the hashtag MLS is back tournament, everyone's favorite named competition, is set to begin on July 8th.
I think it's good.
I don't like it at all. What's good about it? Doesn't matter. I don't have time for it. Hey, it's a bad name. It's a lazy name. We can get better. We'll discuss that another day.
We can get better, but you can't give me a better name. Okay.
Well, we could debate this for hours. I'm really good at this kind of punny stuff.
Go on.
I digress. The set to begin on July 8th, but right now the state where the tournament's supposed to be held, that being Florida, is experiencing about 3,000 new COVID cases every day, and the situation doesn't seem to be getting any better. Kurt, is there any reason or pause for concern here about whether this tournament is going to be able to play when it's supposed to kick off, and other health and safety considerations we might have to think about with Florida?
Well, of course, there's pause for concern. There's always that, given what we've been through for the last 3 months. I think at this point, you see people on social media calling for them to, cancel everything and stop and don't send the teams down there. I mean, that's not going to happen. I mean, there's so much planning goes into these things. You know, you guys know is being part of these productions now, you know, the amount of planning in advance and you know, getting trucks down there and all kinds of stuff. The logistics is just enormous for them to just all of a sudden, you know, call something off like this. Unless it gets to a point where they absolutely have to, but I don't think they've gotten there yet. The issue I see is, you know, and we see this across all leagues, is that every time somebody tests positive, a player, even if they're asymptomatic and without symptoms, you know, they go into a quarantine, and the team puts out a press release, a concerning press release, alerting everybody that they're on top of it. So my question, looking ahead, and there's probably no answer to this, would be, you know, what happens when a team, if a team, you know, has 3, 4, 5 players become infected with COVID-19? And then what does that do to the competition? So that's the big hurdle I see right now for leagues, and that they're announcing these positive tests, and it's good that they're tracing, but what happens when a team maybe can't compete because they come down with too many infections?
Yeah, well, that and what is happening right now for me is a test of how well they've prepared, right? You know, they even when things were looking better in places like Florida a couple of weeks ago, for me, these plans that leagues like MLS have laid out need to include contingencies for what happens if players test positive. You know, what happens if there's an outbreak in the near area? So you need to be ready and have the kind of bubble format, you know, set out that allows you to continue with what you're doing in spite of you know, potentially things that are concerning happening around you. So we'll see. I think this will be a test of how well they've kind of planned this tournament and prepared for it, and hopefully they can continue and get through it.
Look at that smile from Kurt Larson.
I'm just looking at our hangout here.
You want to say it? You want to say it to the public that producer Kyle agrees that it's a terrible name for a tournament?
He's just making me smile.
Major League
I know. I shouldn't be laughing during serious conversations. Yeah.
That's going to do it for us today. For Kurt, Ollie, producer Kyle, and technical director Armin, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your support of OneSoccer. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel and follow us on social media. We appreciate you when you do those things. That's it for us today. Inside the Game's back tomorrow. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you real soon.